Hello everyone, and welcome to another meta report. I'm your host Deathy, and today we're going to talk about the changes that have happened since the item rework update, what's happened to the meta. We're going to talk about specific heroes that are really strong, items that are really strong, and all of that jazz. Let's get into it. Today's format is going to be slightly different, as I've made some visuals in a software called Excalidraw. Obviously, I'm not affiliated with them or anything, but let me know what you guys think about the format as I try to make it a bit more visual and entertaining. Also, you guys may notice I have a new background. I put a lot of work into this. Let me know what you think and if you have any, recommendations for changes to the background. All right, so item rework. What did it change? Well, first of all, buying more expensive items is more viable than it was before. I mentioned this in a previous video, but I just wanted to do a quick little recap of the big changes. Build variety has increased, as you can specialize into your builds more. Counter items are a bit more difficult to slot into your build. So for example, if you need to buy a slowing hex or if you need to buy a decay or specific counter items for certain heroes, the opportunity cost is higher than it was previously. Now these are the main changes. There's obviously a ton of small changes, but just a quick little recap. Now let's talk about important meta changes. First of all, boxes are on the rise. They increase the drop rate and they also made them spawn at 2 minutes. So you get more souls on average from boxes now, and also they spawn a bit earlier. I will say that this is slightly overrated in pubs that I'm seeing. People are over prioritizing boxes, like they're almost ignoring the lane and just doing boxes. The basic fundamentals still apply. Shoving your lane is still good, and you still want to pressure their tower. And if they're too busy just doing boxes and you push their tower and you kill their tower, they're not really winning at the end of the day. So just keep that in mind, but boxes are more important than they were before. Now, they changed the rejuve from 180 seconds to 240 seconds, so from 3 minutes to 4 minutes. And they also gave the troopers a new thing called they have resistances when they enter the enemy base. So your troopers have resistances when they enter the enemy base. It's now 40%. It was 30%. Then I got buffed to 50. Then I got, it went back to 40. On top of that, walkers HP and resistances was buffed. So after the item rework, side walkers especially would get melted very quickly. Now, this is all kind of the case, but their HP was buffed by 10%, and their resistances were also buffed in the process. So before, walkers lost all of their additional resist at, I believe, 16 minutes. Now that happens at 20 minutes, right? So the resistances go down through time. So when they reach 20 minutes, they lose their additional resistances. They also give 15% resist to players nearby, as opposed to 25%, which is what they gave before. Now let's talk about some meta items. A lot of you may have seen the Poshy Pop video about itemization, and a lot of these items were mentioned. My goal is not to talk about all the items, but it's just to say that these meta items that you saw almost every game, Headhunter, Express Shot, Cultist Sacrifice, Superior Cooldown, and Siphon Bullets, are all being nerfed. So Valve is being very, very active right now in the patches. They've been basically releasing hotfix after hotfix, and they've been extremely active. And all of these items have been nerfed. Headhunter has been hit quite significantly. I believe that it's still a pretty strong item, but at this point, if it gets nerfed again, the item's probably just going to be not that good, or it's going to be decent. Express Shot has basically been killed for the most part. I don't know if it's been killed. I don't want to say that because people are going to find uses for it, I'm sure. But now it does 75% damage on alt fires, which was the main usage for it, was alt fires at the moment. So it's been very heavily nerfed, so I wouldn't say it's a meta item anymore. I rarely see it. Superior Cooldown got nerfed just slightly by 1%, so it doesn't really change anything. Cultist Sacrifice got nerfed a little bit, the stats and the duration on it. And Siphon Bullets also got nerfed, and now Siphon Bullets is actually worse than it was before the buff, since it got nerfed by, I think, 12.5% or something. Essentially, it has less DPS than it did before the buff, but we're still seeing it very, very, very often. The item is still strong. Now, I wanted to have a quick section for underrated items, in my opinion. So I've moved the camera once again so that I don't cover the items, but underrated items, there's a couple items that I wanted to highlight that I think are really strong, that I think people know are strong, but are not buying enough in games. So Heroic Aura, I think, is one of the most criminally underbought items I see. I do fundamentally believe that every team should have an Heroic Aura on their team, especially if the enemies have a lot of gun damage. But giving 15% bullet resist to everyone in 30-meter radius is extremely strong. And the active is also very, very strong because minions do so much damage to buildings now. If you have a full wave and you press Heroic Aura, a Walker or even Base Guardians or whatever it is that you're pushing will just get absolutely shredded, even the base. And so I think that the active is really strong. You give 30% fire rate to everyone in the area, 60% to minions, and you also give them a bunch of move speed. And so I think that this is very underrated, and I do think that if nobody on your team is buying this item, you should heavily consider it. Now, Spellslinger, I think people know Spellslinger is strong, especially with the Fleetfoot combination where you can just spam Fleetfoot. Honestly, I think that that interaction is going to get reworked because it's a little bit silly because you just buy Spellslinger and Fleetfoot and you have 100% uptime on the Spellslinger buff because Fleetfoot is the same cooldown as the buff duration. But at the moment, it's quite strong. Gives cooldown reduction, which is a really nice stat. And then on top of that, 10% fire rate, minus 10% reload time, up to 6 stacks. So when you have max stacks, 60% fire rate and 60% faster reload is just crazy stats to have. And so it makes any gun build just that much stronger. And there's a lot of heroes that even if Fleetfoot gets nerfed, a lot of heroes can benefit from it. For example, Warden can just spam Flask off cooldown and is always going to be able to have the stacks up. Wraith can usually use cards here and there to keep the stacks up. There are a lot of heroes that have spammable abilities, for example, Geist as well. Moving into the Spirit category, Silence Wave and Scourge, I believe, are two items that people are buying. People know they're strong, but Silence Wave in particular, there was like a period of time where this item was just being spammed. But now I see it a lot less, and I don't really think that the item is any worse, really. It got nerfed slightly from a cooldown perspective, but I think that the item is still incredibly strong. The Silence has a duration base of 3.75 seconds, as well as having Spirit Resist Shred and minus Spirit Power on the enemy when you use it. And on top of the fact that, you know, it just silences them, this seems like a very, very strong item, and it upgrades from Spirit Sap, which is just a nice path. So I think that this item is very strong. Now, Scourge, I believe, is also criminally underrated. I think I've seen a lot more Scourges, especially in Europe, but like this item gives 40% Spirit Resist to the target, and on top of that, 3.25% of their max health per second. That's a lot of damage, and then it gives 125 health and 6% cooldown reduction, which are all nice stats as well. Finally, moving on to the Vitality category, I just have 3 items to highlight. So Inhibitor, I almost never see this item bought, but this item is really good. Like healing reduction, 35% damage penalty, 125 health, 15% weapon damage. Like everything about this item is really good. I think the thing about this item is you just don't really feel it. When you use it, you don't get that like dopamine that like lets you know that the item is good. But mathematically, looking at the stats, the item is really good, really value packed. And then there's Battle Vest and Enchanter's Emblem. I've been seeing like kind of a resurgence in Europe of these. These items are incredibly stat packed, much like the barriers were. They're not necessarily as mandatory as the barriers were, but I do think that in a lot of games, you do benefit from having these. And if you have both of these, you have 5 out of combat regen, as well as 18 resist, which definitely is quite useful. And so I think that these items are a bit forgotten about, and they probably should not be. That's it for the items I wanted to highlight. Now, let's get into which heroes are really strong right now. I've got the tier list right here that I made. I made this tier list, you know, I wouldn't say I made it in a hurry, but I didn't spend hours on it, right? So there are definitely heroes in here that if I got other opinions, maybe I would switch them up a little bit. And tier lists are always very opinionated, right? So this is what I feel. This is not the fact. This is not, you know, the be all end all. At the end of the day, this is just my opinion on these heroes, so please remember that, and everyone's tier lists are going to be different. So what I'm going to do today is for the S tier heroes, I'm going to recommend a build for each of them like I did in previous meta reports. So if you want the builds, that's going to be after this tier list. For this tier list, I'm just going to explain very briefly what I think about some of the higher heroes and just do a quick little description for all of them. And, you know, try not to make it too long. And then for the builds, you'll see there's going to be timestamps on the video, so you can easily go to whichever part of the video you like. Now for explanations, tanky heroes tend to do quite well dispatch. Most of the tanky heroes are pretty high up, except Mo seems to be the one suffering the most. But Shiv, really strong. He has damage amp. He has a percent execute when everybody got more health. He benefits from some items. He was an abuser of Siphon Bullets and Headhunter as well. Now those got nerfed, but he still feels really strong. Abrams was an abuser of the melee items who were really strong. They got nerfed, but he's also just incredibly tanky and hard to deal with. And essentially, heroes that were countered by anti-heal do in general feel stronger because anti-heal is harder to obtain early. Similar story for Warden. Warden's barrier being global really helps him a lot because now it blocks all damage types, and it also benefits from resistances, which means Warden can just get very, very tanky. His laning stage also feels a lot better than it did before, just with, you know, how much health regen he has and how much base health he has, etc. Wraith and Mirage just output like a ton of damage. Mirage still has a strong lane. Wraith's lane is like her weakest part probably, but once she gets specific items going, she just does so much damage and is so strong. Now A tier is packed with a lot of heroes that are quite strong. You know, Paradox and Holiday, both pick heroes, are doing quite well. Lady Geist is still strong, even though she got a lot of nerfs. Lady Geist was easily like S+ tier before all the nerfs to like Boundless and all these other interactions. Calico still feels really strong, especially with the box running. 7, especially with the Lightning Scroll ultimate build, feels very oppressive, but you can also build him just regular carry build and it feels strong. Viscous, even though armor piercing rounds is in the game, it feels like not a lot of heroes actually get to that point and get to the point of buying the item. And since not a lot of heroes get there, it feels like Viscous ball build is still incredibly oppressive, and he also has a ton of value as a support as well. Ivy, like, her ultimate cannot be debuff removed anymore. That's incredibly strong. She has essentially global presence, great split pushing, great wave management, and all of her abilities are strong. Her laning stage is weak though. Kelvin, once again, anti-heal is a little bit weaker, so gives a lot of value to Dome and stuff. He does have some counters, but I think overall a strong hero. And Yamato still has a strong lane, still has a strong mid game. A lot of like spirit scaling and stuff was nerfed, but she still benefits heavily from things like Tank Buster. And also on top of that, she has large amounts of flat damage that are added to her power slash when she levels it to the max. So even though spirit scaling in general is a little bit worse, it doesn't really matter because she gets so much flat damage on her power slash that she still just chunks you for a ton of damage. I think Lash is still strong in my opinion. B tier I don't think is weak. I think he's still very strong, and in the right comp he's playable. I just don't think that he's as high priority as most of these other heroes above him. Similarly, Dynamo in the right comp can thrive, and his healing is incredibly strong, and Black Hole is strong as well. A lot of his abilities are useful, but if you're not into the right comp, the hero is not that good. So he's situationally very good, but on average I think he's decent. Same for Viper. On average she's quite good. She's been nerfed quite a bit. I think that we might also just not have a lot of people that play Viper in North America. I think really good Viper could make the hero look like A tier for sure, but I don't think she's S tier. That definitely is not the case. McGinnis I think is very good situationally. Her healing very strong, her wall strong. A lot of her abilities are pretty decent. The only problem is like she doesn't offer as strong like ultimates as some of the other supports like Ivy or Kelvin, for example. Like McGinnis ultimate is much less useful than Dome or Ivy ult. Infernus is also pretty decent. He still has damage amp. His afterburn does a lot of damage, but he still kind of has the same issues that he did before. Sinclair is still strong. I put him in B tier, but I think you could easily put him in A tier, depending on the player, depending on the game. I think the hero is quite strong. A lot of his kit is really strong, but it feels like a lot of his damage got reduced. Now, melee Sinclair is still very strong, so just that might be enough to put him in A tier, but I put him in B tier just because I haven't seen him have that much success on average. I also put Vindicta in B tier, even though she's very strong. And by the way, this is not ordered. I would not put Vindicta at bottom of B tier. She's probably more like higher B tier. But she is a lot squishier nowadays, especially with the barriers being gone. She has to buy, weapon shielding and spirit shielding if she wants to live, or a reactive barrier. But all of those items don't really give you stats, whereas in the past you could buy enchanter's barrier and combat barrier, get a lot of stats, and also be tanky. Similar reason, Grey Talon's not that great for the similar reason. And Pocket also benefited heavily from barriers, and now that barriers are gone from the game, he does feel very squishy. However, his ultimate cannot be removed by debuff remover, and that is the one saving grace that Pocket has at the moment. It says that his ultimate is actually very strong. So if you're playing into a lot of tanky heroes, such as some of the S tier heroes, Shiv, Abrams, Warden, then Pocket is quite strong. So the reason that he's still being picked is mostly as a counter to this healing meta of Shiv, Abrams, Warden, Kelvin, like all these tanky heroes that like to sustain. Pocket's ultimate is very good against them. Haze still dies instantly, but she has potential. I would say she's a lot better than she was last patch. The slowing bullets and slowing hex combo is very strong. Mo and Krill I thought was really good, but he seems to have fallen off a bit. I just don't really see him have much impact. I'm not entirely sure why. I mean, his gun definitely got gutted, but I feel like his utility is still really high. His disarm is really good. His ult is really good. He's tough to kill in lane. And so it's possible that we just haven't fully developed the meta of Mo and Krill yet, but he does feel a bit weak. And finally, Bebop at D tier. Bebop got nerfed really hard, which, to be honest, the game is way more fun now that Bebop is terrible. I mean, I don't know if you guys agree, but now that Bebop is not a great hero, the game is so much more fun, and I still don't have fun when I lane against Bebop. So even though Bebop is significantly worse than he was before, when I lane against him, I'm still not happy. So sorry, Bebop players, sorry, Bebop mains, but it has to be done. Now the game is more fun. Everybody's having a better time. Let's get into the builds for the S tier heroes. Now, for the Shiv build, you have a couple options. I think the Together build is pretty good. The Siphon Bullets, if Siphon Bullets gets nerfed again, will probably be removed. This is kind of like flavor of the week. But, you know, if it's removed, you'll just go some of the other items that you go as far as your main items, right? And essentially, this is mostly a gun / survivability Shiv. So you're not really investing into Spirit. And as far as the AP goes, you are maxing your ultimate, putting 2 points in dash for the lane, maxing your ultimate, and then you're going to max your knives after putting 1 point in your 3 for extra survivability. This build is very bare bones and very straightforward. As always, there's going to be the build IDs in the chat below. Sorry, in the comments below, but you can see the build ID right here. Now for the Abrams build, we've got the Salty Abrams build. The build ID is right here. Put it in the description as well. The only thing about this build that I would say is he really likes Juggernaut. I think that there's a lot of really good defensive items other than Juggernaut that you can go. So look at the optional category or the late category. I really don't think that you need to rush this item or go this item as your first tier 4. It's very situational. But in certain cases, it is one of the better defensive options. It just depends on the enemy's team composition and what you need as well. But this build is a great base, and you know the overall Abrams philosophy has not really changed. I would say return fire is also optional depending on the game, and so that really depends who you're facing. But if you're facing people who like to shoot you a lot, then return fire is great. Now for Warden, of course, I've got my own build. For those that have seen the video, thank you for your support. For those that have not seen the video, you can look at my channel. It's in the most recent videos, the Warden guide. I think that this build is quite good. However, if you would like to try something else, here's another build that you can try. So this is a build made by someone who's in my chat, Goblin, a decent amount. I haven't personally tried this build, but this is very different from mine. It's very much gun focused. And so, you know, I would recommend that you give it a try. It looks quite good. Siphon Bullets, once again, if it gets nerfed again or something happens to it, I think this is only flavor of the week. I don't think that this item is that good on Warden, generally speaking. And so we'll see if it stays, but the rest of it makes sense. Toxic Bullets is also a situational buy, you know, if they have people that are very tanky and or heal a lot. But in most games nowadays, I would say it's not, you know, almost mandatory, or it's really good to have it. And then the rest of the item is mostly just focused on Gun Warden with Cultist Sacrifice to get you a little bit of that extra, you know, farming speed. For the Wraith build, I'd like to give a shout out to the Situation European player, and I think that this build is just a little bit different than what most Wraith players are doing right now, and so I wanted to, you know, showcase this. Now, this is not necessarily the best Wraith build out there, but it is a lot of fun, and it's essentially playing around Shadow Weave, right? In order to give you great ganking potential, and essentially playing a little bit like an ambush character where you just come out of nowhere, ult someone and kill them. This is not a new idea. This idea has been, you know, used for a very long time, and it, you know, was the meta once upon a time. Right now, not really, but I think that it's still very strong and still has a lot of potential. So feel free to try this out. As always, here's the build ID, but I'll put it in the description as well. And last but not least, for the Mirage build, we've got the Crayon. I believe this is his testing build, but seems, you know, pretty standard as far as Mirage builds go. I believe he's going to keep this one updated, and you can check out his Twitch to ask questions as well. But essentially, you know, this is a gun Mirage. Some of these are situational as far as greens. I think you can usually pick up both, in my opinion. But he says buy one or the other, so it depends on the game. And once again, this is another Siphon Bullets using build, which is a common trend that we've seen. Siphon Bullets, however, tends to be very good on Mirage, even when it wasn't like meta. So I don't think that we'll see this item leave Mirage's kit. I think it's going to be probably stay. But yeah, this is essentially just, you know, gun Mirage. You're going to be applying debuffs to everyone and having a good time. All right, that's it for the video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please leave a comment. If you didn't enjoy, I mean, leave a comment as well. Tell me what you didn't enjoy. I'd love to know. And yeah, let me know what you think of this slightly modified format, you know, sticking to what has worked with meta reports in the past. And I will catch you guys next time. Have a good one.